that the sidewalk is falling apart. Jack, what was the second part you said?
It's that it is
Okay. And not only would the sidewalk be unkept, but probably what in general is unkept. Okay, so that everything about that society is unkept or falling apart. So hence that society is unkept and deteriorating. So if a sidewalk is falling apart, and we also know, therefore, that no one would be using it, because you would think if a sidewalk's going to be a high traffic area, folks would fix the sidewalk so that Josh would be able to walk on it, Tyler would be able to walk on it, Emily would be able to walk on it, but no one needs to walk on it, so therefore it's simply going to be falling apart. We don't have a lot of traffic, literally, whether it be foot traffic or road traffic, so roads, bridges, all those things, chances are probably starting to fall apart and become dilapidated as well. Details on the opening paragraph. How would you describe the setting overall? So what information from first paragraph, what would be like specific words that we could use to describe it? Did you get the button? Did you get the details from the first paragraph? Sure you did. There's something there. So the fact that there are no lights, with the exception of a TV. You said ominous instead of an ominous setting? It's at not worried about writing out full sentences. Any other details that folks are making reference to besides the fact that we don't have any lights? Tyler? I'm sorry? Okay, silent, quiet. Logan, what else do you have for number 2? Okay, so that whole emptiness, so whether it's darkness, no lights, quiet, empty overall feeling, very tomb-like, you're kind of certainly getting that eerie kind of ominous feeling that would come through. For number 3, still same page, how would you describe the mood? Which descriptive terms help to set the mood? A lot of the things that we were just kind of referencing here would go along with it. Eerie, I know, was a popular mood once we were able to figure out how to spell it. What were other moods that we're getting? Solitary? Okay, yeah, that one would certainly work. What else do we have for moods? Nate, what do you have for mood? You don't have to read the whole thing.
I said
ominous. Other Nate? Eerie. Emily, what do you have for a mood? Okay, so we're all pretty much going, Mark? Apocalyptic. Okay, so we all have pretty much a negative mood ranging from something that is simply eerie all the way to, if it's apocalyptic, essentially have the end of the world taking place, but something that's pretty much going to kind of fall into those, into that range. Descriptive terms that help to set the mood. Connor, what do you have for like a descriptive term?
Quiet and dark.
Quiet and dark. Evan, any terms? Phantom. Gavin, terms for your mood? So far as the term? Like the details from the text. You could see someone going like dark windows. Did tomb?
Oh, we did?
Okay.
Oh, it's at the end.
Yeah. Anything else? So, sentence along the way, the mood could be described as eerie or apocalyptic, solitary, due to the words that Bradbury is using, such as quiet, dark, phantom, dark windows, tomb, all those kinds of things. Going on to page 59, what do the words wintry, windless, desert, and dry suggest about Meade's impression of the urban landscape at night? Not worried about what necessarily the question's asking about, but if you were just looking at those words, what kind of landscape setting would you expect? Logan, don't worry about iPad for
Wasteland.
now. Okay, so what other kind of settings? Can't say desert since it says desert. Connor?
I was just gonna say like if desert place.
All right. Deserted location. Okay, anything else? All right. What type of landscape is the question asking us about? Like within the question itself, what kind of landscape are we looking at night? We're looking at an urban landscape. So if you were just to think about, use of the term urban, city, buildings, people, this is kind of what we would expect. This is the reality that's taking place. So what do the words wintry, windless, desert, dry suggest about Meade's impression of the urban landscape at night? The urban landscape comes across as being completely desolate or deserted. It's essentially a wasteland as opposed to what we would commonly think of as a populous area, a busy area, a place that would be quick, moving, fast-paced, but we don't have any of those things taking place. So Bradbury's terms suggest that Meade finds the landscape to be, I'm going to say ironically, empty. And it's ironic because urban usually means busy and populated. So you would expect it to be a fast-paced world, but this is one where there's pretty much nothing going on at all. Why do you suppose there's only one police car left in such a large city?
It's not that the city was going down to cut freedom on. There's no crime in the city because everything's the same.
And even 3 cars, in today's world would be a minimal amount. Westview Police probably has how many vehicles do they have? So yeah, I mean at least a dozen vehicles that would be out there. So certainly more than simply that you just have the 3. They,
No one's really out. They're just inside watching TV.
So you put the 2 together. Why is crime down? Why is crime down to such a significant or drastic amount? Because there's literally nobody out at all times. So only one police car is needed because there is no crime. So like for police, no jobs. And even the police car itself is an automated one, so there's not even a police officer. Exactly the same thing, so there's more conformity than there would be as opposed to having some individuality taking place. Not that you want crime to be taking place, but the idea that there would be nobody outside is going to certainly strike as being a little odd and unusual. What's Bradbury's purpose for having the police say that writing is quote unquote no profession? No profession.
No reason.
Pardon?
No reason.
So writing is not a profession because no one reads. And I could follow this up with since everyone, what do they do instead of reading? Watches TV. January, when we start doing Fahrenheit 451, written by Ray Bradbury, It's a society where the firemen, their job is not to put out fires, but their job is to start fires. Why do you have that look on your face? I'm being confused.
Yeah, you should have read it.
Firemen, yeah, you should have read the book. We haven't read yet. Firemen start fires. Specifically, they burn books.
We totally read it.
So writing is not going to be a profession, certainly in that world, because if you have paper, you have the textbook, we would burn you.
Wait, really?
Yeah, we burn your house down, and if you happen
Yo,
to be in
that's
it,
pretty
too
cool.
bad.
It's just like Molotov. It's like,
No, the firemen come with their hoses.
they use hoses. What? That's not fun.
Fire hoses.
That's not fun.
Yeah,
Just
basically
like
flamethrower.
take a bottle of, some gray juice or something, tie a rag or.
Brendan, at what temperature does paper burn?
I don't know. About fire degrees.
Oh, is that why it's called?
Wait.
I thought it was like a.
That's the temperature at which paper burns. What words and phrases in the paragraph beginning "you might say that" suggest a mood of death and despair? So on page 60, where we have the "you might say that," specifically, which ones would we be looking at? "You might say that," said Mr. Meade. "He hadn't written in years. Magazines and books didn't sell anymore. Everything went on in the tomb-like houses at night now," he thought, continuing his fancy. The tombs, ill-lit by television light, where the people sat like the dead, the gray or multicolored light touching their faces, but never really touching them. So you have the use of tombs, you have the use of dead, you have ill-lit, gray. All those terms would certainly have much more of a death and despair type feel to them than a happily well-lit place. In this portion, the speaker or the dialogue is not always identified. What effect is Bradbury trying to achieve by not identifying the speaker? How would this read differently when you have Bradbury and the police car officer robot thing talking if every time you went, Leonard said, the police car responded, Leonard said again, the police car responded, as opposed to just having the straight dialogue? And it's probably going to be reading at a quicker pace. You have it feeling a little bit more heated, or at least a little bit more kind of confrontational taking place. When we were reading Oedipus Rex, we were taking a look at Stithiomythia, where you have really short conversations taking place where it kind of heightens the suspense. By not identifying the speaker, I think it allows for that kind of rapid fire feel. So, heightened suspense, or conflict, kind of is able to go with that quicker reading pace by not identifying the speaker in that way. What emotions do the words briefly, illumination, square suggest to you? This with description of more of Leonard's home. So illumination, warm, what do we start to get? I mean, what's the overall mood and tone that we've been identifying? Apocalyptic, tomb-like, solitary.
I just feel like something good.
Okay.
Positive.
Yeah, a much more positive mood. And, with especially illumination and warm, you kind of have this idea of something that is finally a light in an otherwise dark world. So you have some positive connotation, but the way that gets looked at is, well, if you want to be a writer, if you're going to be out walking, if you're going to have this idea of light and warmth, you're going to be going to the Psychiatric Center for Research on Regressive Tendencies. What do we mean when we say that something is regressive? Especially as opposed to it being progressive? So what? You're right that we would be reverting back. Some of you would consider cursive to be regressive.
Unimportant. Not like good. Unimportant is a word.
You would unimportant? Yeah. So you revert back to something that is old-fashioned.
Is demodernized? Is that a thing?
Demodernization?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Demodernization.
Think of a P word that would be similar to demodernize. Primitive.
Yeah, primitive.
Yeah, primitive. That's a primitive way of living. That's a demodernized way of, kind of living. So I think, something that's old-fashioned, something that's primitive, something that is out of date is going to be regressive, whereas progressive is going to be meaning you're keeping up with the times, you're even going ahead. Why would he be taking there just for walking down the street? Well, if he is doing something that is out of the ordinary, there's a better chance of him rebelling, of him acting like an individual. So he is refusing to conform to essentially the standard or what is going to be expected of him. He's dangerous for him being walking out because he has different ideas that they don't want anything to go along with. And if you like the way that the society is with TV, entertainment, no crime, you can certainly understand why he might not be expected, looked at in a positive way. What might be the writer's purpose in describing Mead's house, which we were kind of taking a look at before? It certainly illustrates how Leonard is different. And it kind of gives you an idea that said, he's a light in a dark world. The way in which he's trying to make things more sophisticated, more intellectual, more thinking capacity, as opposed to just simply following along and doing what everyone else would be doing. Final paragraph, how does the writer use repetition both to create a mood and achieve his purpose? So last paragraph, what is getting repeated over and over and over again? Okay. Tyler, did you have another word? All right. So, how does that help achieve his purpose? If you keep referring back to empty, might make us think of earlier words such as tomb, but essentially, if you're looking at the society, it lacks substance. In this futuristic society. 13, I think we're pretty good so far as overall purpose, reliance on technology. This part here would be opinion. Do you think his reasoning is justified or unjustified? Do you think he takes it too far? Nope. As we have earbuds, headphones, iPads, given to you by schools.
I have a pen.
He definitely went way too low.
They only have TV. Still going.
Mia has 9 TVs in her attic.
Oh no. I messed up my mustache.
If you exaggerate, if you have irony, being arrested for walking, no crime, there would be an S-word type of literature that was termed for you earlier in the year when we did our vocab lists.
Samsung.
That would be the technology. If you're doing social commentary and exaggeration's a big part of it, or understatement, tends to be satire. So you could be, and with satire, you could exaggerate where you're still identifying it's a problem. So not saying that he thinks we all should have TVs, but no, it might not go to this extent, but I'm going to exaggerate it just so people can kind of understand the point that maybe that reliance is a little too much. Bradbury wrote this story in 1951. Other than television, what other types of technology do you think Bradbury was concerned about? Wouldn't be phones. Didn't really have them. Could be radio.
The
Radio? Okay. What about it? Well, because 1950s, you're in that Cold War, nuclear arms race is kind of beginning.
Space race.
So yeah, space race is starting to take place. I'd say that weaponry would be a pretty good example of probably what would be happening. That would be the main fear. What if the world comes to an end, where you would hide under your sturdy desks in school because that will protect you from anything.
Yep.
That's why we practice. What might have happened to this society that there would be no crime, but that walking would be considered criminal behavior? What is Bradbury suggesting about society from a thematic standpoint? I'd say it would all pretty much come back down to that conformity issue. That if you have a public that is willing to do whatever they're told, then you're going to have a society where you don't have free thinkers, you don't have people arguing about ideas, you don't have people debating any kind of issues or whatnot. Everyone falls into place, no need for police. If you still need to finish your constructive response, that would be the homework assignment for tonight. Otherwise, we come in on Monday for a review going over the two short stories. We're ready to go for Monday.